Howdy my totally tubular gamers, we are back with another video. Now, I was working on some videos, I was listening to a video about Destiny 2, and it got me thinking, man, some video games really just love to waste your time. While one could argue that video games in general are a waste of time, I was thinking about video games where they just go on way too long, or they do a bunch of things that really drag the entire experience out, or sometimes the entire game feels like it's dragged out. I was thinking of live service games, maybe some RPGs, and then I was like, you know what, this will make for a pretty good video. We're going to be talking about video games that don't seem to respect your time at all, where they just take their sweet ass time, and in doing so, they take all of your time up, and it's unnecessarily so. We've all played games that have incredible pacing, they don't go on for too long, and you end up wanting to go back to them. A great example is The Last of Us 1. The pacing is amazing, it's constantly keeping things interesting, and it doesn't really feel like there's any filler. Well, these 10 games, oh yeah, there's going to be plenty of filler, plenty of downtime, moments that shouldn't have been here, and it really just feels like these games are trying to gobble up as much of your time as possible to the point where you don't play like anything else. I've heard some people say that a lot of the time with modern games, it feels like they want you to treat it like a job. We're talking about those games. Games that really take up an absurd amount of time. More time than they absolutely should. I want to preface though, I don't think any of the games on this list are bad. I'm not saying these are bad games and that they're not worth any time at all. I'm just saying that, yeah, they don't respect your time. They go on too long, they waste a lot of time, and ultimately they take up a lot of time that you could have put into several other games. So this list is in no particular order from several generations of gaming. Let me know down below of any games where it felt like it was just wasting your time and you wanted it to end, or it felt like things were unnecessarily long. And they can even be games you like, they just have a pacing issue. Anyway, to respect everyone's time, I'm cutting the intro right here. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. We got the Patreon and the super thanks. Any support is truly greatly appreciated. Let's get to the first game. So what honestly came to my mind first when thinking of games for this topic was Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Now, Valhalla has plenty of good things about it, and I would consider it a decent improvement on Odyssey, but something Valhalla really does is waste a lot of time. This game is like one of the definitions, key examples of games that do not respect your time. This game is absolutely gargantuan. It takes absolutely forever to finish. Even if you don't do the side content, you're looking at a 50, 60 hour game, and it just doesn't need to go on that long. It really is just a prime example of a game that's incredibly bloated, stretched, paper thin, and the game could have been half the length it was, and it would have been a much better experience. The game just has this massive, huge open world, like one of the biggest open worlds in any video game, and the game just loves giving you quest after quest after quest. Go kill these people, go take over this town, go raid this village, kill more people, and it just keeps going and going and going and going, and you're like, is it ever going to end? There were several moments where Valhalla really did feel like this endless game, like there was just no end in sight, that these quests, they might even be randomly generated. This game does have randomly generated quests, so I just stuck to the main storyline, and yeah, there are plenty of cool missions and moments throughout, but these are really just sprinkled in there in between hours and hours of monotonous, tedious, repetitive gameplay, and it's seriously lacking in the variety department when it comes to the combat, parkouring, mission types, objectives, who you're interacting with, shoot, even the story. It becomes just an absolute slog. It really does feel like a chore, and again, occasionally they do sprinkle some good shit in there, but for the most part, it's a seemingly endless, tedious experience that takes up just way too much time. It's one of the longest games I've ever finished, and I don't really think it was worth it. I've heard some people play through this game like a live service where they play a little bit every week. I shouldn't have to do that. As it stands, yeah, I think Valhalla is a good game, but I don't really think I could recommend it just because it takes up so much of your time. It truly does not respect the player. Okay, here's what really inspired this video. Live service games. Live service video games do not respect your time in the slightest. Now, I've been playing video games a very long time, through multiple generations. I know that multiplayer games can very easily suck up all of your time. From your first-person shooters to your battle royale games to your MMOs to even your fighting games, multiplayer games really can be a time vampire where legit they just suck everything up. So the idea of multiplayer games taking up all of your time isn't exactly new, but with modern day live service games, it just feels different. It feels like they want you to treat these games like a job, where they want you to log in on a daily basis, play several hours, log in a few times every week, do all of these challenges, and the multiplayer just seemingly never ends. It continues progressing, there's more unlocks, there's new seasons, and it's to the point where it feels like it doesn't respect your time, like they want you to just play this game indefinitely forever, continuously playing more and more, spending money on skins, and it's like, hey, I actually want to play some other video games. Oh, no, you can't do that. You gotta just play our one game. Like, if you try to go through an entire battle pass of Fortnite or Fallout 76 or several other live services, it's absolutely ridiculous. You need to play just a shit ton of this game if you want to get through the battle pass, and it's like, what if I'm playing more than one live service game? I've got a few different friend groups. No. You can't do that. You're not going to get anywhere in these battle passes. And then there's a chance that the game totally falls off. It stops doing super well. Maybe it stops becoming all that popular, or worse, it even shuts down just a year or two later. All that time and money you put into it, gone. Like that. You got nothing to show for it. And that's one reason why I'm super weary on any live service game, because there's a very good chance it's not going to make it. Most of them don't, and if they do, they probably don't respect your time. They're mad grindy, and you need to just put tons of hours into it if you want to get anywhere in the battle pass or anywhere through its progression. Games like Apex Legends, Fortnite, Fallout 76, Destiny 2, Warzone, Genshin Impact, like the list goes on and on and on. I could say it really about any live service game. It's grindy, it doesn't respect your time, and you're gonna have to put a lot of time into it. Sure, some of these games do actually have very compelling, fun gameplay loops. I'm not denying that. What I'm talking about is that they really just suck all of your time away. It doesn't feel like they ever come close to respecting it, and they just want more. These games just want more and more time, and as more of these games come out, the less of them I play. It's like, how can I play all of these live service games at once when I have just a shit ton of single player games to finish? Well, I'm going to focus on the single player games, because if I just play the live service games and 5 years from now these live service games are all shut down or dead, I really got nothing to show for it. At least with the single player games, I can look back on those experiences and actually remember something, feel something. We could be here all day talking about live service games versus single player games. That's not what this video is about. What I'm just trying to say is live service games, they want you to treat it like a job. They want to suck up all your time, and the last thing they do is respect it. Alright, so now I'm going to talk about something older. It's not just modern games that haven't been respecting players' time. There are plenty of older games that don't respect the players' time either, specifically older JRPGs. Lots of these older JRPGs take seemingly forever to finish, and when I think of like the perfect example for this, my mind actually goes to Skies of Arcadia. Now don't get it twisted, I love Skies of Arcadia. This really is one of my favorite RPGs of all time, but I will be the first to admit this game does not respect your time. It goes on for a very long time, and it's just totally unnecessary. If you're someone who loves older RPGs, I'm sure you can think of an older RPG that you actually quite like, but yeah, it kinda wastes your time. For Skies of Arcadia, it wastes your time in a number of areas. The biggest area, and really the biggest issue with Skies of Arcadia in general, is just how long and slow some of these animations are. When you're in battle, like every attack you do just has this really long drawn out animation, like every single attack. Some of them are upwards of 20 seconds, and that might not sound like a lot. Then you realize you do hundreds upon hundreds of these throughout the game, and it all really starts to add up. Some of these moves, some of the special moves that you get later in the game, take upwards of like 30 seconds. There's a few in there that actually take a very long time, to the point that it's quite comical. And then when we get to the ship battles, I think these battles are really cool, but man, they just take a long ass time. The ships just move really slow, and every attack that either you do or the enemy does, it just takes a long time for the entire animation to finish and for it to be your turn again. Some of these battles can take upwards of 20 or 30 minutes. And again, I'm not saying that the battle system is bad in this game for the ship or on foot, it just takes seemingly forever, and it feels like it's wasting your time. Another area where it feels like Skies of Arcadia doesn't respect your time is just how frequent the random encounters are, especially when you're on the ship. They're just out of control. And I know the GameCube version toned it down with the random encounters, but it's still just too many. Random encounters are a great example of how older RPGs don't respect your time. And I'm not saying random encounters are inherently bad, it's when they go out of control with them and every few steps it feels like you're getting into an encounter. Older Final Fantasies, Dragon Quest 2 and 3, some of the older Pokemon games. There's just way too many random encounters too frequently, and it really starts to make the entire game drag. And it's like a dungeon that was only supposed to take a few minutes is now taking upwards of an hour because of just how many random encounters there are. And sometimes the random encounters can be pretty tough. Skies of Arcadia's is not. They're just more tedious than anything else because they're actually quite easy. You still have to watch all the slow ass animations though. And the last thing I want to bring up for Skies of Arcadia in terms of it not really respecting your time, the game has a very slow movement speed, whether you're on foot or in the ship. It just feels really slow. Again, one of my favorite RPGs ever. It just certainly has some pacing issues, and coming back to it nowadays, it's really easy to see that, yeah, it kind of wastes a bit of time. I will give a huge asterisk though and say that one day I hope this game is re-released and they just give it a speed up function. Literally a speed up function would fix everything. So fingers just super crossed here. Please re-release Skies of Arcadia. It's been far too long. The game is way too inaccessible. I'm sure this one will ruffle some feathers, but I have Red Dead Redemption 2. If you want like the perfect modern game example of a game that does not respect your time, that is not a live service game, look no further than Red Dead Redemption 2. Obviously, Red Dead Redemption 2 is a masterpiece, but I think we can all agree there is just way too much horse riding in this game. And the horse riding isn't bad in this game. It is more on the realistic side, which I know is not for everybody, but I wouldn't say it's bad, anything from it actually. There's just way too much of it. For every mission, you have to ride to the mission, oftentimes you have to ride back, and you really just do this over and over and over. And this is a very lengthy game. Even if you don't do any of the side content, you're looking at 40, 50, maybe even 60 hours. If you do any of the side content, you're looking at quite a bit more, and a lot of the game really is horse riding. If you didn't have to do this much horse riding, the game would be significantly shorter. So with that, I think the game is a bit unnecessarily long. Instead of providing engaging, fulfilling content throughout the entire experience, there's quite a bit of filler where you're just riding from point A to B. And of course, at first, it's actually pretty fun to do all this horse riding from A to B. You know, you take in the world, the sights, how pretty the game is, how much detail there is, and then 30, 40, 50, up to 60 hours of this, it really does start to grate on you. And it very much does start to get old, repetitive, and tedious, and I really just wish I could teleport to where the mission location is. I don't really want to ride the horse anymore. This really is like my biggest issue with Red Dead Redemption 2 as a whole, is there's just so much unnecessary horse riding. The game also does go on a little too long, even outside of that. There's plenty of missions here where I'm just like, I don't know if that really added much to the story, or really the game in general, but maybe I wouldn't have felt that if I didn't do so much frickin' horse riding. And yes, I'm very aware that if you upgrade Dutch's tent and Arthur's tent, you can do a little bit of fast traveling, but it really doesn't cut down that much on the horse riding. And yes, you can do the autopilot where it goes into like the cinematic mode and it does it for you, but it still does take quite a while, and you really shouldn't have to do that, man. I just want to skip some of this horse riding. And I'm sure there'll be people who are like, guy buys cowboy western yeehaw game, then complains about riding the horse too much. Like, what did he expect the game to be about? I expected to be riding the horse. I did not expect to be riding it for this much time and really have no way to speed this up. The game is just disrespectful with how much horse riding there is. There didn't need to be this much horse riding, damn it. So for this entry, I don't just have one game, I actually have an entire series, that being the Shenmue series. Now, I love Shenmue. I'm a Shenmue apologist. I'll recommend these games all day and night, but I will be the first person to admit that these games are full of issues, and one big issue with the games is the pacing. These games are ridiculously slow when it comes to the pacing, especially Shenmue 3. It just feels like it's moving as slow as molasses. It feels like it's moving as slow as the slug I accidentally ran over the other day. Like, we are talking ridiculously slow. It takes forever for anything to happen in these games. And I'm not talking just about from a narrative perspective. Shenmue absolutely has that in spades. I'm talking from a gameplay perspective as well. Everything just moves very slowly. The animations are all quite slowly. The characters talk incredibly slowly. They have just tons and tons of dialogue that is honestly just a bit unnecessary. The movement speed can be quite slow. If you can think of a gameplay aspect that can be slow, Shenmue as an entire series has it. Now you also got to take a step back and realize that a lot of people really love this series because it does take its time. You really are able to get fully immersed into these worlds. They do have a great attention to detail. All of the characters have tons of dialogue. And there really are some beautifully designed areas here, but I'll be the first to admit Shenmue has no problem taking its sweet ass time, especially in the frickin' third game, where at times it feels like you are just wasting time, where barely anything is happening at all, and you look back and you're just like, I've been playing this game for 3 or 4 hours and I couldn't even really tell you what I did. I just walked around some areas, talked to a few characters, and that was it. Like, nothing happened really from a gameplay or a narrative perspective, but hours have passed by. Another great example of when Shenmue just kind of doesn't respect your time is in the first game. They make you get a job as a forklift driver at one point, and you actually do your job as the forklift driver. It's pretty mundane, boring shit, and you do it like once and it takes like 10 minutes and you're like, okay, that was whatever. And then the game makes you do it again and again and again, and you have to do this for 7 days in a row. It's over an hour of this mundane, boring forklift driving. As someone who's been a forklift driver in real life for a few years, it's just as boring as it is in real life, and the game really actually makes you do like a full week of this, and it's like, we definitely didn't need to do that. That was completely unnecessary and just kind of a waste of time. And you can point out several instances across all 3 games where, yeah, there's just a bunch of unnecessary filler in here. And if we're being totally honest, Shenmue 3 as a whole is actually just kind of filler, but we're not going to get into that discussion today. Look, I'm just going to end things here and say, I love Shenmue, I love the world and the atmosphere and the vibes that these games have. Oh, and the soundtracks are pretty excellent, but this series has no problem being a time vampire. So our next game might also bug some people, but I have Days Gone. I like Days Gone. I think it's a pretty good game and way better than people actually gave it credit for. I know at launch it wasn't exactly liked, but nowadays I think most people can enjoy it. But I will also say, even as somebody who quite enjoys this game, it really doesn't respect your time. Days Gone just goes on too long. It's one of, if not like my biggest issue with the entire game, is that the pacing just isn't great in this game. It takes quite a bit of time to actually get going, and then, yeah, it does pick up, it does get exciting, there's plenty of cool, memorable moments. The game even has a really exciting climax, but then it gets to this third act where like everything just starts over basically, and you spend like another like 5 to 10 hours with the game, and it's like, oh, I thought the game was done. You're telling me that like there's another third to the game, and yeah, there's quite a bit more to the game after that really big climax, and I just was never huge on that. Yes, for story reasons, it does kind of make sense, and there actually is a pretty good payoff by the end of it, but that entire last act really just felt incredibly unnecessary, and the gameplay really didn't get all that changed up from earlier in the game. Like, yeah, you get better weapons, your bike gets better, and you actually do fight some hordes, but this ultimately just felt kind of unnecessary. It feels like it could have all been shoehorned into a mission or two, but for some reason they really just drag this entire thing out and don't really mix up the gameplay enough to the point where I'm like, yeah, this was totally needed. And while part of me feels like this might just be a nitpick on my end, I have seen a lot of people online complain about the same thing, that the last third of the game just feels unnecessary and that it really drags the entire game out. I think if the game ended like right when it climaxes, or maybe there's another mission or two, the game would have a pretty solid pace throughout, and I certainly wouldn't have it on a list like this. That last third of the game feels like it just takes way longer than it actually probably does. It just starts to feel a little bit like a chore, and like they weren't respecting all the time I put into the game beforehand. I think they very easily could have cut all of this nonsense out and just given us what we really wanted, giving my man Deke some justice. Nowadays though, I don't think Deke's getting any justice. I know Days Gone 2 was cancelled, at least Ben's studio is still around, they're all very nice people. And overall, yes, Days Gone, it is a good game, but that last act, it always just stuck with me in a bad way. So here we got another one I'm sure people are going to disagree with. I have the entire Xenoblade Chronicles series on here. There are 4 main games and several expansions for all of these games, and yeah, I think all of them don't respect your time. And I actually quite enjoy Xenoblade Chronicles, especially that first game with Shulk. Like, that's one of my favorite RPGs ever, but even as somebody who really does enjoy these games, yeah, they just feel like they do not care about how much time they're going to suck away from you. All of these games are very big, long, just drawn out experiences that take, upwards of 50 to 100 hours depending on how much side content you do, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I've played plenty of RPGs that are very long, but I've also played plenty of RPGs where it doesn't feel like it's trying to suck away all of your time like the Xenoblade games. I think the best example I can give for this series is just how long it takes to do some of these boss fights, especially on the harder difficulties. Now, Xenoblade as an entire series just has some crazy complicated battle systems, especially Xenoblade 2. And there's really not another series like it, at least when it comes to the battle system. But man, do some of these battles just take a freaking eternity. Some of these boss fights, especially in like the third game, take upwards of 15 to 20 minutes per fight. Of course, there's dozens of bosses in these games, and yeah, it just feels like you're in these fights way too long. They did not need to be this long. They didn't need to be this drawn out. Yes, they are big epic fights, but come on now. This isn't Final Fantasy 16 or Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, where all these crazy set pieces are happening all at once, so it makes sense why these boss fights take upwards of 20 minutes. No, this is Xenoblade, where it's pretty stagnant and you're just interacting with its systems. And while I'm sure there are plenty of people that really enjoy just how long some of these battles are and how much they get to interact with the system and how deep it goes, I'm one of those people who is like, yeah, it's cool, it's great, but these battles, they really don't need to go on that long. And I feel like the further you go into this series, the more long and just drawn out like every fight feels. I love in the first one how it feels relatively simple compared to, say, the third game. Maybe I'm just a simpleton myself, or maybe this is just an instance of me not getting it with these games, but it just felt like these fights just took way too long. Also, some of these areas are just way too big, and this is across the entire series with very little, if anything, to do in them other than fight some enemies. Like, they don't need to be this big if they're going to be this empty. And on top of this, there is plenty of filler in this entire series. Moments, scenarios, areas where it just doesn't really add much to the entire story and it feels kind of pointless. And at times it can just kind of feel like padding, especially in Xenoblade Chronicles X. Man, that game is just way too long for its own good, and the pacing is just not very good in X. The pacing is certainly better in the main trilogy. It's actually pretty decent. But I've just never been able to shake off this feeling that the series, it just doesn't really respect your time. It's going to take a very long time to finish these games, and while they are good and the stories are really great, I feel like things could have been wrapped up a little faster, especially when the battle systems and just the battles in general are concerned. So here we got a double header, double creature feature as I like to call it, and that is Donkey Kong 64 and Jet Force Gemini. Both of these released for the Nintendo 64 and were developed by Rareware, and both of them don't respect your time in the same way. They make you collect just way too much shit to just beat the game. Both of these games obviously are collectathons, and you're going to need to collect things in order to beat it, but you shouldn't have to get as much as you have to get in these games in order to simply just beat the game. In the case of Jet Force Gemini, you actually have to 100% the game to beat it, which is just frankly ridiculous. You have to go full completionist mode outside of Charity Fraud, find all the ship parts, rescue everybody. You have to do everything in order to see the final level, and you shouldn't have to do that. I kind of hate it when games make you 100% them in order to see just the normal ending of the game. I think 100% completionist runs should give you like a secret ending or a little bonus or something like that. You shouldn't have to do that in order to beat the game. And in Jet Force Gemini's case, it is way more frustrating than most games because the little gremlin fuckers you have to rescue, they can actually die. You can kill them on accident, they can get killed by enemies, and if that happens, you have to restart the entire area. And so that's just a bunch of time wasted. And it just becomes uber frustrating. You're just straight up wasting time here. Outside of maybe map knowledge, you're really not gaining anything. The game should only take like 7 to 10 hours to finish, but usually it takes like 12 to 15 hours to finish just because you do have to 100% it. You have to make sure nobody dies, and it just wastes your time. Ultimately, that's what this game is doing. Donkey Kong 64, well, video essays have been made about how you just collect way too much stuff in this game, and straight up you have to collect way too much just to even get the normal ending. If you want to go full collector mode where you get every single freaking banana, all the coins, all the golden bananas, all that extra shit, go ahead and do that. You shouldn't have to get as much as you have to collect in this game in order to just beat it. Especially those stupid arcade coins, man. Why do you gotta get these? There's just way too much you gotta collect in order to see the normal ending of the game. I think they could have just reduced how much you actually had to collect in order to see the credits. Something else that has always grinded my gears and is a clear example of a game just kind of wasting your time is the fact that you can't change characters on the fly. Yes, I'm aware that there's a mod that allows you to do that, but natively you have to go back to the character changing pad in order to switch Kongs. And it just becomes incredibly time consuming and tedious. Like, this isn't exciting. Going back and forth over and over between the character switching pad is not fun. It's not fulfilling. It's just monotonous and boring by the end of it, and it's one of the reasons why I really just don't ever want to play this game again. I don't want to go back to the stupid fucking character pad. I don't want to collect a million bananas, and it's like, I don't got time for this shit for either of these games. They're both good games. They're absolute classics and some of Rare's best on the 64, but neither of these games give a damn about how much time you've got. Alright, you thought I was gonna let Ubisoft off the hook with just one game on a list like this? No. Ubisoft has plenty of games where it feels like they don't respect your time, but I'm going a bit older with this game. I'm actually going with Far Cry 2. Now, I know a lot of people actually really do love Far Cry 2 and have a lot of fond memories, and they're probably like, wait, what? You're going with Far Cry 2, not like Far Cry 5 or 6 or New Yawn? Or plenty of other open world Ubisoft games? No, I'm really sticking with Far Cry 2. When I was thinking about games that do not respect your time, I really did think of this game pretty quick because I remember this game just has a shit ton of driving in it. Kind of like Red Dead Redemption 2, I think this is a pretty good game. It actually has a lot of great elements and it was a little ahead of the time, especially when it comes to the fire mechanics and the physics in general, but there is just so much driving in this game that is totally unnecessary. The map isn't even all that big, but you have to drive around it so freaking much, and it's so tedious and repetitive by the end of it that it just makes me go numb. Like, it gets so monotonous driving around the same areas over and over, having to drive to them back and forth for these missions, or when you just are investigating an area, a lot of the times you get jumped by enemies, you gotta stop to fight the enemies. You can drive away, but they might chase you or hunt you down. Usually it's better to just fight them. These feel almost random when they're going to show up. It feels like they show up way too frequently, especially at these checkpoints. I remember when you're looking for the diamonds in the rough, it really just kind of takes forever to find some of these diamonds. It takes way too long. And yeah, the pacing, it's just not really there with Far Cry 2. It has plenty of great moments. The weapons are actually pretty good outside of the annoying ass jamming. The game looks great even nowadays, and you absolutely can still have a good time. I'd rather play Far Cry 2 over several other Far Cry games, but man, it really felt like this game just did not give a damn about your time. They just want you driving back and forth. There's really no fast travel here. And if there is, it really just isn't all that helpful. I remember the first time I beat this game, it took me around like 15 hours, and if I didn't do all this driving around, I probably could have beat it in like half the time. And yeah, like I said, I could have totally picked another Ubisoft game, but Far Cry 2 particularly stuck out to me as a game that just did not give a shit how long it was going to take for me to finish, and it didn't care that all of this driving was monotonous and filler, and it still bugs me to this day just how much unnecessary driving there is in this game. Alright everybody, last entry for today. I do want to respect everybody's time. I have an entire genre of game here, and that is survival games. Survival games just straight up do not give a shit about how much time you have left on this earth. There really is no other way to say it. Every survival game really feels like it's designed to just suck away as much time as possible, whether you're managing all the survival elements, you know, like your resources, you got to build your base, you got to fight off enemies, defend against everything, or just how long it takes to get good shit in the game, like Ark, like Pal World. These games really just are designed in a certain way where you have to put an absolute metric shit ton of time into them, and that's exactly what they're banking on. They want you to just low-key dedicate your life to the game for a time if you want to really get anywhere in it. Take Pal World, for example. I don't even really like survival games, but I booted up Pal World. I wanted to see what it was all about. I look over at the clock, 12 hours passed. I'm not even kidding. I ended up just playing a shit ton of Pal World over the span of a weekend, and that's exactly what the game wanted. They create these just really addicting loops where you just fall into the hole, and that's all you want to do is just play the survival game. You're constantly thinking about the survival game. What's the next thing you want to build? How's the game going to become easier? How am I going to get more cool shit? How am I evolving further? What's the end goal here? That's what survival games are all about. They really don't have an end for the most part. They just want to take everything from you. Okay, maybe not everything. They're not going to break into your house and steal all your valuables or anything, but you're not going to have time for all these valuables because you're playing the survival games. There's plenty, like plenty of games I can use as an example for this. DayZ, Ark Survival Evolved, Rust, 7 Days to Die, Pow World, Valheim, Project Zomboid, Grounded, V Rising. The list just goes on and on and on. Survival games really do just suck up as much time as possible. I've heard and seen it myself of people just getting low-key addicted to survival games. It's like all they want to play. If you've played a survival game, I'm sure we all have that story of where we started up a survival game and ended up playing just a metric fuck ton of it. And you're just like, yeah, survival games really do take up a lot of your time, and they usually are built out in a certain way so that they take as much time as possible. Whether you're waiting on crafting time or how long it takes to get somewhere in the game, they really make it so that you have to put a lot of time into the game in order to get anywhere significant. And hey, for some people, this is all a positive. They love that they can get just a ton of time out of these games. They don't care that it really does take like forever to get anywhere in them, and they just love that they can play them pretty much endlessly. I'm not one of those people. Clearly this video shows I'm not one of those people. I play lots and lots of different games, and I don't like it when games waste my time. I want my games to have good pacing, and I really want to be engaged throughout. So let me know down below if you've ever played a game where you felt like it was just wasting your time or didn't care how much time it was going to take. I'd love to hear some more examples. Maybe I'll even have a part 2 if y'all really like it, but I don't want to waste anyone else's time. That's it for today's video. Hope you all have a wonderful day. If you made it to this part of the video, you should comment and subscribe. If you're going to comment though, you can comment our secret code word. And that code word is going to be Christmas. We're only like 2.5 months away from Christmas. We're getting closer and closer. I'm real excited. All right, see y'all later now. Bye-bye.